This is the Business of College Sports podcast with your host, the founder of businessofcollegesports.com, Kristi Dosh.
And Jeff Schemmel, founder of College Sports Solutions.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Business of College Sports podcast presented by College Sports Solutions. I am Kristi Dosh, and I am joined by my co-host, Jeff Schemmel of College Sports Solutions. Jeff, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Looking forward to spending some time with you today.
Yeah, and this is our first official podcast together. We have worked together for, I think we're like going on a decade now. Jeff sat next to me at NACDA convention one year and I think asked me to plug in his laptop. And then we started talking about who we were and that we both had law degrees and the work that we were doing in this space. And I feel like became fast friends. And then I've been lucky enough to do some consulting with Jeff over the years. So when he said he wanted to start a podcast, I said, wait, come join me on my podcast. Let's co-host this together. So I'm excited for this new iteration of Business of College Sports podcast.
And not nearly as excited as I am to get this started. And the respect that you command around the country is well known, Kristi. And for that reason, and you're so experienced and at doing this sort of thing, it was a natural for me and our company to partner with you on this.
Yeah, and you've actually sat in the chair. You've had the AD role. I've never even worked inside a college athletic department. I tell people that all the time. So much of what I've learned has been from either reporting on college sports or the opportunities I've had with you to work on consulting projects. So I think between the two of us, we've done a lot of the different roles around college sports and hopefully can bring on some guests to cover some of the areas we don't know. And today, we have an awesome guest for our first guest. We have Cole Gahagan, the president and CEO at Learfield. And I told him one day he's going to be the answer to a trivia question because he's going to be our first official guest together.
And Cole is not only is Learfield a leader in college athletics, particularly in the multimedia rights space, but Cole has become, in the short time he's been the leader at Learfield, has gained a great deal of respect around the country and took Learfield through a very difficult time with the pandemic.
Yeah, and we're going to dig into that in our interview. I'm going to rattle off a little bit of Cole's bio, and then we will get you guys into the interview. Cole has more than 25 years in sports, entertainment, media, and technology. He joined Learfield in 2020. Perfect timing to have to start somewhere, but was previously the chief commercial officer for Fanatics. And prior to that, he had executive leadership roles at Ticketmaster and Live Nation. So the amount of experience he has in both pro and college sports is incredible. And I think everybody's going to enjoy our interview with him. I know I learned a lot. Hopefully you all will as well. So without further ado, I give you our interview with Cole Gahagan of Learfield. Welcome everyone to the Business of College Sports podcast. I am your host, Kristi Dosh, and I am joined by my co-host, Jeff Schemmel. Jeff, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Looking forward to this interview today.
Yes, we have a fantastic guest today. I already read you his bio, so I won't prolong it. Cole, thank you so much for joining us here on the Business of College Sports podcast.
Kristi, Jeff, it's great to be with you guys.
We have got so much to dive into with you today. And Jeff and I, as we were planning for this, realized we had totally different things we wanted to talk to you about. So we're going to hit you with everything we've got. And I'm going to let Jeff go first.
Great.
Cole, thanks again for doing this. And I think the first question, obviously, lots of headlines a couple of weeks ago with Learfield and the restructuring. And I'd love to find out from you how that's made a difference for you going forward and what that means for your current clients and prospective clients.
How much time do we have on this podcast, Kristi, again?
As much as we need.
It's been an extraordinary 11 months to say the least, as you both can imagine. But it's been a rewarding one as well. So let's kind of start a little bit with the history, and then we'll talk about, I think, maybe the impact. I think that the history is of what's transpired over the last, not just the last 11 months, but the last several years is important context for why this matters, Jeff, getting to the question that you asked. But look, it's widely reported, and I've been very transparent and candid in interviews and discussions that we've had publicly about the two facets of Learfield from a financial perspective. Facet one is that this has always been an extraordinarily healthy and successful company, always with the exception, obviously, of COVID. There was a time there over 12 to 18 months that it didn't matter what business you were in the sports and entertainment industry. You were impacted to some degree by the effects of COVID. So outside of that 12 to 18 month period of time, Learfield has always been an extraordinarily healthy and successful company, which, Jeff, you've been in the industry for a while. You know Greg Brown, you know the players of this industry for so many years. Ben Sutton, Greg Brown, Tim Pernetti, Jason Loveland, so many people who built this company. It's nothing to do with me, who built this company and made it into what it is today. Fashioned ultimately a company that was very successful in the P&L. We've been, again, very transparent. Company that does over $1 billion in revenue and is significant EBITDA positive and cash flow positive. But the second facet was that we had a balance sheet challenge. And, I mentioned some of those individuals, those players that founded and led the companies that ultimately became IMG College and Learfield, and then those two businesses merged. And when you have that kind of M&A activity over a prolonged period of time, call it a decade and a half, you're going to see sort of debt that mounts on top of debt. And that's what happened to this company's balance sheet. So we had a really healthy company on the P&L, and we had an unhealthy company on the balance sheet. That's a good position to start from. Not a great one, but it's a good position to start from when you've got to sit down and think about navigating a restructuring. And we were fortunate enough that from the get-go, because we were such a healthy company on the P&L, we could see a pathway from beginning to the finish line of an out-of-court restructuring that would allow us to take that debt, cut it by over 60%, and then be able to continue delevering the balance sheet because we have such a healthy company. So that's kind of what got us here. Now, what it means is almost immeasurable. First of all, the most important thing that it means is we can take cash flows that have otherwise gone towards that debt servicing and having to meet our obligations on the debt side. We can point way more of those cash flows to the business. And we can invest in our people. We can continue to invest in innovation and drive this business forward as we have a responsibility to do. The second reason that it's so important is because in addition, as you both may have read during the announcement, in addition to our restructuring on the balance sheet, we added $150 million of new equity and new capital to the balance sheet. That only allows us to get even more aggressive in the investments that we can make. We can, in fact, engage in M&A activity and not have to do so driven by debt. We can continue to invest CapEx in modernizing our tech across our different platforms and advancing the industry as a result of that. So, like I said, it's almost immeasurable the impact that it has on the company and then what we can do for both our people, most importantly, and the partners that we serve. The more we can invest in this industry to help drive it forward, to help evolve it, to help stay ahead of fan expectations, to help stay ahead of NIL needs, the better, I think, for everybody in it, our partners and our people. So it's been an exciting and rewarding, last few weeks and months, that's for sure.
And maybe one follow-up, Cole.
Sure.
You mentioned the pandemic. We've all learned great lessons coming out of the pandemic. What are some of the operational lessons learned through that pandemic and the changes that had to be made because of it?
Well, I think that there are lessons there's certainly some operational lessons. Let's start with the most important, which are leadership lessons. I think that so many of us learned, or in my case, a principle that's always been core to my leadership style, communication and transparency, being communicative and being transparent. Those are not always hand in hand. You can be communicative but not necessarily transparent, or you can be transparent but not overly communicative in your outreaches. This was a core principle that our leadership team has had for a while. It's from the day that I joined, being open and communicative and being transparent. I think that we had to really overdevelop that muscle. All of us did during COVID. And as a result of that, we've created a culture of expectation in and around Learfield of having good visibility into where we're going, good visibility into how we're going to get there, and good visibility into the results. And I think from a leadership perspective, that's probably the flower that bloomed the most in a positive way for our company and for Learfield's interactions with its clients in the industry. From an operating perspective, I would tell you that sometimes, as we've all experienced, sometimes those extraordinary moments in life can force positive outcomes. And for us, the positive outcome that it forced was it allowed us to advance so many things faster than perhaps we would have otherwise had liberty to advance, so that we can evolve this industry. We doubled down during that period of time on our data infrastructure and build out of fan base, which now is the largest data infrastructure in college athletics. We have 40 million known fans and 140 million anonymized fans where we've dropped cookies and tracked them. We do that because of the two front doors to college athletics that we have within the Learfield family, Pat Gulen and Sidearm. So we were able to use that period of time to accelerate the growth of that platform by going to our school partners and really making it clear that when we come out of this mess, the most important thing we've got to be able to do is strengthen the relationship between us and the fans. Because remember, at the time, none of us really knew what the rebound was going to look like. None of us really knew what the other side of this thing was going to look like when it came to fan dynamics, right? So we were able to go to schools and say, now's the time that we've got to double and triple down on building this connectivity, strengthening this connectivity with fans. That allowed us to then, once you have that, you have license to go and create more products to connect with those fans. Programmatic and digital marketing, content that we can deliver to fans. So from an operating perspective, it gave us, as I said, license to run faster towards the types of what we believe to be foundational pieces that were necessary in the evolution of our industry in the years ahead. So I think that was the biggest operational probably change coming out of COVID.
Thanks, Cole.
We've seen so many changes in college athletics over the last few years, some precipitated by the pandemic and others not. What does the multimedia rights marketplace look like right now? What are some trends you're seeing?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest, when I talk about what it looks like in the trends, let's start with a couple of misconceptions, because to understand trends and direction, you've probably got to make certain clear from the pathway some of the misconceptions. One of the misconceptions is that the multimedia rights space no longer has any guarantees, or Learfield or other companies aren't putting traditional media guarantees on the table. It couldn't be further from the truth. I think guarantees are important components of our business. The reality is we are coming in as stewards of the most important asset of an athletics department, which is its intellectual property. Now, athletics departments have a litany of assets that are extraordinarily valuable and important, but the most important is that intellectual property, is that logo, is that mascot. So we're coming in as the stewards of that. That's a hefty responsibility that carries with it, I think, in most circumstances, of a hefty commitment by a company like ours to a school. I think that where the misconception has come into play, understandably coming out of the pandemic, was because of the need to think about deal making differently. And from that, I think there was this view or this misreporting that companies were no longer putting guarantees on the table. I think they're important in our business. They have to be guarantees. There are two elements that are, to us, the most critical in a healthy dynamic. Number one, they have to be guarantees that are well within the earnings potential and the revenue potential of a partnership between a company like Learfield and its school clients. And number two, because, Jeff, as you know, you've been in the chair, right? Because, interestingly, no multimedia rights company, Learfield included, owns the campus, the stadium, the assets, the decisions that are made about what you can run after and what you can't. Because we don't own any of that. The school owns it. You have to have a cooperative relationship where the school, the athletics department, the AD, has an incentive to run with us towards those opportunities. Because if you don't, if you have a structure where that incentive doesn't exist, you really have an imbalanced partnership. And so the first most important misconception that I think is helpful to always talk about is guarantees are in our industry and will be, I think, for quite a long time, and they're important to us. I think important to the schools. I think the second misconception, Kristi, is that traditional sports marketing is going to die on the vine or is going to go away, kind of like outdoor display advertising. That'll never happen. I think traditional sports marketing continues to be one of the most vibrant spots for brands to connect with consumers. And those consumers are known as fans. So you remove those misconceptions out of the mix. I think we've got a couple of very important headings right now. The first is what we've already touched on. We have to know who these fans are. Brands are no longer just comfortable with, you're giving me X number of impressions per year in a stadium and an arena, and I'll find enough value in that. There are too many ways for them to smartly invest their marketing dollars and their brand building dollars. We can talk more about how that's being done effectively in an exciting way, but that's the first thing. The second thing is the obvious, which, Kristi, I know you're going to love. It is the everyday blurring of the lines between a traditional multimedia rights service and NIL opportunities. I've been very open about this in the last couple of weeks. As you guys are probably aware, we've launched the Advantage Center at Alabama. I said as much during the interviews there. We are quickly heading in a direction where the responsibilities of an MMR partner like us to help build brand connectivity between schools and brands is going to be just as important as our ability to build brand connectivity between student athletes and brands. So there is as I said, there's a blurring of the line of those two activities that's happening by the day. And now my discussions with Jeff's colleagues from around the country almost entirely center around how do we do both of those things really well for them and for their student athletes. Those to me are the biggest trends of what we're seeing right now, I think, in the multimedia rights space.
And I'm assuming, Cole, and I guess I've seen more of this, and speaking as a former AD, that guarantee is important, but I think we're seeing a lot more of getting together and sharing revenue against that kind of a guarantee, and the university stepping up and really getting behind your efforts, whether that's finding new inventory possibilities or looking for ways to maximize the revenue. Without
a doubt. I say this all the time, Jeff. You may have heard me once or twice say it. I think, as you guys may know, Kristi, you talked about it in the intro. My background is probably more pro than college. Now, I've orbited college to various degrees over the last 25 years, but predominantly my background's been more pro across Live Nation, Ticketmaster, Fanatics. It's probably been more pro, which is to say that team presidents, NFL, NBA, NHL, MLS, commissioners at the professional league, those have been colleagues that I've known at the highest levels over the last couple of decades. And ADs, of course, in the last 3 years, have become equally, if not closer to now, athletics directors. And there's one thing that I have learned with 100% certainty, and that is ADs are the hardest working executives in all of sports. I have been very clear about this in the last several years. I mean it more sincerely than I can express. You will not find an NBA team exec, an NFL team exec, even a Major League Baseball team exec that has to go to 81 home games. You won't find a team exec that has 26, 26 teammates and CEOs, if you will, known as head coaches, that has 600 student athletes to be responsible for on an everyday basis. On a given Saturday in the spring, we'll wake up and go to a rowing event at 8, and we'll go to a volleyball game at 11, and a baseball game at 1, and a basketball game at 7. That doesn't exist in the pros.
Yep.
And so my view is these are the busiest executives I have ever known in my entire career. If we don't have a partnership structure in place that gives them reason, maybe not on an everyday basis, but on a relatively constant basis, to think, how can together Learfield and I go create more opportunities or find more revenue with this thing, that thing, or something else? If we don't have that kind of partnership structure in place, there's no way that AD is going to wake up every day thinking about how we can do these things together, because they're the busiest executives in the world and they're thinking about 5,000 other things. And so to your point, Jeff, the discussion that we've continued to have more and more with ADs in the last several years is, let's make sure that at the backdrop of you being the busiest executive that I've ever encountered, we have a partnership structure that incentivizes you on a relatively constant basis to think, how can we make more money together? Because otherwise there's no time. There's no time in the day. There's no time on the calendar. They're just so busy. So it's very important to have that kind of incentive structure in place for sure.
It sounds to me like you all are constantly looking for and finding new ways to serve your partners, and NIL certainly has added, I'm sure, some more tasks on your table, and I can't wait. We're gonna put a pin in NIL for a minute. Are you actively pursuing new partnerships with universities and conferences, or are you really focused on your current partners right now?
Yes, and we are. Look, my number one priority is execution and growth with the partners that we work with today across 5 operating business lines, hands down. Especially because we're coming out of such an extraordinary 2.5-year period. First COVID, and then a restructuring. Now is the time that we go execute and we go deliver. So, our most important priority is continuing to grow the partnerships we have in place, whether that's ticket sales, whether that's ticketing technology, whether that's licensing with CLC, multimedia rights, or sidearm. Our job is to continue growing the business. Beyond that, I don't look at it as necessarily, Kristi, an interest to grow just for the sake of growing. Now, I have owners who've made an investment in our business that anticipate we will continue to grow the business, both organically and non-organically. But I look at it slightly differently, which is there's so many amazing things that we're doing. It's not a talking point. It's not BS. It's real. There's so many things that we're doing to help advance and evolve this industry. And again, somewhat being an outsider's insider, I hope somewhat credibly say we're a little behind in certain areas when you look at our competitive set in the pros. And our job is to continue to invest in and advance this industry. And we've done that in the last 3 years. And to Jeff's earlier question, we're in a better position than ever to go do that in the next 50. And so I look at it less about this desire to grow as much as there is a responsibility and a desire to help schools, to help them figure out, and particularly at the wake of what, to your point about NIL, is going to continue to be changes to athletics departments because of NIL. What will likely continue to be costs that are incurred by athletics departments because of NIL. Our job is to deliver as many solutions to the schools as we can to help them generate more revenue. So it's more of a responsibility and an interest to help them grow beyond the traditional lanes than it is anything else. So it's both. We have a very focused priority on delivering and executing on the partnership ecosystem that we have in place today. And we have a sincere desire to reach more prospective partners to help them grow their athletics departments tomorrow.
And Cole, have you experienced, especially with your multimedia rights partners, university partners, and the NIL craziness that's going on, and we haven't gotten our arms completely around NIL rules and how it's supposed to happen with student athletes. Are you running into conflicts? For example, if you have an exclusive category at an institution and maybe that's Nike or Adidas or Under Armour or whoever, and all of a sudden a student athlete has a competitor's deal. I mean, how are you guys handling that?
I got to tell you, Jeff, perhaps somewhat surprisingly, but I stress somewhat. I'll tell you why in a second. We have not run into too many conflicts. Now, the somewhat aspect or the reason I think that's the case is genuinely because of the extraordinary vigilance of our general managers out in the field, their relationships in the markets, the Ames, Iowas of the world, the Ann Arbors of the world, the Gainesvilles of the world, the relationships that they have in those local markets with brands and brand partners, the relationships they have within the athletics departments that in most cases are just bulletproof strong. to help everybody in that local college sports marketing economy kind of travel down the right lanes. Our GMs have done phenomenal work. I mean, in literal terms, on July 1st, 2021, we went out with 10 pages of guidelines from our GMs to our athletics departments to sort of help in that moment that everything went live, to help them think about the maneuvering now that NIL had become a thing. At 10:30 on June 30th of 2021, my phone rang, and it was my friend Bubba Cunningham from UNC. And I look at the phone, and it's 10:30 my time, so it's 11:30 in Chapel Hill. And I answered, I said, hey, Bubba, what's going on? And Bubba literally said this to me. He said, Cole, what's going to happen tomorrow at when we all wake up? And it was part in jest, and it was perfectly indicative to me of both a little bit of the chaos of the time. And Jeff, you probably know this. I don't know. Every AD leaned in during that period of time, but Bubba really leaned in during the 6 months and year before everything, before NIL went into effect on July 1. So he was the most informed. He was calling me, one of the most informed. He was calling me the night before, and it's perfectly indicative of kind of how chaotic it was and how important Learfield was in that moment to sort of help say, here's how we're going to get through this phase, and then we're going to figure out how we get through the next phase. So our GMs have done a really remarkable job kind of keeping things on the right pathways and lanes since July 1 of 2021. And knock on wood, we really haven't seen too many conflicts out there, which has a lot to do, too, with how we've managed NIL, and particularly around our Allied program. But not too many conflicts, which is a good thing.
Yeah, that's a tribute to you and your team, and also those ADs and their teams, for sure.
That's right. Who think of each other as partners, because you have to view it that way. We have to rely on each other. To your point, both sides have got to lean in to ensure those conflicts don't exist. It's exactly right.
I'm curious, and I know some of the answer to this because I've covered some of the stories, but how have sponsors responded to the opportunity to engage in NIL at scale through somebody like a Learfield? I know I've done the Zips car wash pieces the last couple of years, so I know all about that partnership, and I'll stick that down in our show notes. But, big picture, what has that looked like?
It's been, well, as we've done multiple times, let's take a step back in time. We didn't know, obviously, Kristi, we had no visibility into what it was going to look like. Our only proxy for this was what we've seen in the pros for decades and decades, right? Because NIL in the pros has always been around. Pro athletes for the last 50, 60, 70 years, going as far back as Mickey Mantle, have done ads for brand partners. So our only proxy was the pros. It's not a very good proxy because we're an amateur sport and they're professional athletes. So we really had no visibility, limited visibility is probably a better way to say it, into what the reaction of agencies and brands were going to be. Were they going to move en masse over to NIL? Was that going to be cannibalistic to the MMR, business? Was there going to be no interest whatsoever because student athletes move around and go from school to school, and it's hard to peg the value of partnering with student athletes? We had no idea. And what we have learned, which has been, as you can imagine, pleasantly surprising and rewarding, is that, first of all, NIL, as I think the three of us would agree, it was more than necessary, and it was long, long overdue for student athletes to be able to generate revenue off their name, image, and likeness, whatever that is, a camp, licensed products, marketing deals. It was long overdue. And it's been rewarding to see how many student athletes now can create a new way of life for them and for themselves and for their families. The second thing that's been really pleasantly surprising and rewarding is that it's been additive to our traditional multimedia rights business when done right. And what we say is NIL done right, what we believe is the right way to go about it is, I'm not an agent. I don't represent student athletes. That's not my job. My job is to represent the school, to bring brand partners into the mix to create opportunities for schools, and now in a post-July 1, 2021 era, to bring brands into the ecosystem to create more opportunities for student athletes as well. And so because of the way that we've approached it, I mentioned Allied earlier. Learfield Allied is our program of creating cooperative deals between universities, brands, and student athletes, such that the student athletes can be in the marks. They can be wearing, we'll go back to your Aztec days, Jeff, you could be wearing a San Diego State hat, you could be wearing a San Diego State hoodie or jersey. And because the brand partner has said, I want to be a partner with the university and I want to go and work with student athletes in NIL, Allied allows us to create those cooperative deals. Right. Because we've approached it that way, it's been additive. It's been incremental, which has been great.
Go ahead, Kristi.
Go ahead. I was just going to ask you to play favorites for a second. I know you're not going to want to, but can you think of an example of a company?
I love both of my kids equally.
Is there a company you think has done particularly well in terms of leveraging what you all offer and the ability to work with student athletes, and maybe even the ability to work with student athletes across multiple universities? Is there a brand that you're like, okay, everyone needs to pay attention to what they're doing because everyone should be doing that?
Well, the good news is as you guys know, there are several great examples. You actually mentioned one of them as probably one of the first that I would point to, which is Zips Car Wash. Now, is Zips a Fortune 500 brand yet? No, but they are picking up market share and picking up brand equity by the day. So it's not a brand that might be as well known as a Sony or a Nike or something else, but they're growing significantly. And what has been just awesome to see from the moment we started the discussion with Zips is how they think about tying student athletes into their campaigns to showcase what kind of a car wash operation they have, right? And their car wash operation is you come in, you drive your car through, it gives you this extraordinary wash. You can go vacuum, you can go clean, or you can just leave. And it's sort of this self-service model that's pretty quick. You can get in and out really quickly. And how do you showcase both the car wash to a prospective customer and how quick and easy it can be? Well, one of the ways to do that is to have a conversation in the car wash that only lasts approximately 60 seconds, whatever the total time period is. So they've been brilliant in saying, all right, I want to do deals with universities because we have so many opportunities for growth in college towns. We think student athletes have stickiness to them when it comes to the fans of those universities. Oh, and there's a great way that we can utilize a conversation with student athlete to really express how quick all of this goes, and you can be in and out in your car's clean in a matter of 60 seconds. So I think Zips has done a great job. I think Dunkin' has done a terrific job, not only incorporating student athletes into the mix, but Dunkin's gone very far and very wide with the number of student athletes that they've wanted to work with, and they've been highly diverse in the athletes, both men's and women's sports, which Zips has done as well. So those are a couple that I think have done a really good job for different reasons. And Zips continues to grow in the number of student athletes and the number of universities it's partnered with. Dunkin' came out of the gates, really strong with large numbers of schools. The last thing I'll say about both of them is that whether it's Dunkin', whether it's Zips, whether it's Cheez-It, which we partnered with at Michigan, regardless of the partner that we have in place, what I think is brilliant that every single one of them is doing is saying we're not just partnering with the student athlete. We're also ensuring that we can pull the university's intellectual property into it, because the student athletes, for as extraordinary as they are, they come and go. By student part of the student athlete definition, they'll be gone in 4 years if they stay at the institution where they started. But because of the transfer portal, they're transferring schools pretty frequently.
For sure.
So if I'm a brand or an agency and I'm thinking through this, if I can root my investment in part with the university, which is going nowhere, then I can actually create a campaign that lives on, and I can pull different student athletes in year after year. So I think that's what all of them have done that's really smart, is combine those two.
Have to ask you about what we're all talking about these days. Two-part question. One, your thoughts on the conference craziness and it's particularly the Pac-12 and what has happened there, and then how has that affected Learfield, if at all?
The most immediate effect that I have felt is dinner table and party conversations where everybody asks me right off the bat, what's going to happen? What's going to happen next? I have no, as I always say, I have no crystal ball that has any visibility greater than any other fan or any other working professional out there. It's been for all of us. Look, we're not just stewards of this industry and this business that we're in, Jeff. As you know, we're all fans. We're all fans of college athletics. I have become a fan of hundreds of schools and hundreds of ADs and deputies that I consider friends, that I want to see succeed and want to see great things happen for. So it's been a bit head spinning for me, just as much as it has been for anybody else, to see how things have shaken up and where they've landed. Some things I scratch my head over and go, boy, this is going to be interesting, if not challenging. Other things I go, this is outstanding. I love that this worked out. You can see behind me, I'm a alma mater of two Dallas-Fort Worth schools, or I'm an alum, of two Dallas-Fort Worth schools, undergrad TCU and grad school at SMU. I'm unapologetically a fan of both of my schools. We all come from somewhere. I'm a big fan of both of them, and I was so happy for Rick Hart and SMU that worked out and to move into a Power Five, conference. So it's been head spinning for me as much as it has been for anybody else. No better visibility into where all this is going to land. As I tell people all the time, the only, to me, guarantee is that we ain't done yet, and it's gonna keep evolving in the years ahead. What it's meant for Learfield so far. Not a whole lot. And what I mean by that is, we've got some analogs we can point to over the last decade. We've got Missouri, we've got Texas A&M, we've got Nebraska. We've got several situations where we've seen schools move into a new conference, and we've got data around what that meant. And I think that regardless of the angle you come at this, good news or bad news or neutral news, we don't really see too much in shakeup to the business when schools move conferences. Again, kind of regardless of what the shuffling looks like. I think what you find pretty as a constant in this industry for decades is what drives more activity than conference changes, wins and losses, and innovation. That drives the bulk of the activity. So we haven't seen much of an impact yet. And if we do see an impact, I hope it'll be positive for the schools that have moved into new conferences, for the schools that are still, determining what their landing spot is going to be.
Right.
I hope it's going to be positive for everybody.
All right. I've got a question that I didn't research beforehand. So we'll see how this goes. I try not to ask these, but it popped into my head. Is Colorado a Learfield school?
Well, the vast majority of schools, remember, are a Learfield school in one form or another. We have 5 business lines, right? So we're super fortunate to work with pretty much every school in one form or another, which is awesome. Colorado, not only is Colorado a Learfield partner across our business lines, Colorado is a Learfield partner across every single business line that we have, which is kind of cool, including multimedia rights, which is
all right. Then you know what's coming. I want to know about the prime effect. So I grew up in Atlanta when the Braves went from worst to first. I am a big Dion fan, and that has made me a big Colorado fan this season so far. Not to mention my Gators are not having world's best season, so I'm going to jump ship to Colorado for the season. Can you tell yet what that impact is starting to look like?
Well, we know what it's starting to look like. The business is up significantly. Our sponsorship business is up over 40% year over year. As you guys have read the reports that we've read, and we've been fortunate to be a part of it. Every aspect of our business. Again, we're partnered with Colorado and Rick George in all aspects of our business. So let's track it. Sidearm, Paculin, ticket sales, CLC, and multimedia rights. All of those business lines, unsurprisingly, are up substantially year over year. I was coincidentally, Kristi, I was in Boulder on Thursday. I had lunch with Rick, and we had a guest appearance. Coach Prime joined us for lunch, and so we spent a good hour chatting about all of this and more. But I went by the store. The stadium store is at the bottom of the stadium there in Colorado, and I went by the store, and it was 11:45 on a Thursday morning. Now, there was a little bit of pride because at the bottom it said a Fanatics experience, so I loved seeing my Fanatics family operating that store. But I went in and I sent the Fanatics crew this note afterwards that I went in there, and at 11:37 a.m., whatever it was, on a Thursday, there must have been 10 to 15 people shopping the store, and there were at least 7 or 8 people in line buying gear on a Thursday in a stadium store. And to me, there's no better indication of what's happening than to see that. You'd be hard pressed to find any other stadium on a Thursday at 11:30 a.m. where you'd see that many people in there buying gear.
Yep.
An hour before kickoff, for sure. You'll see that and more.
What surprises me is that there was gear to buy, because I just spent a month in Colorado and I had a very difficult time finding anything to buy. In fact, I hit a couple of Walmarts. I was staying in Breckenridge, but had to take somebody to the airport one day, and I was driving from Denver back out to Breck. And I thought, well, you can usually find some college stuff in Walmart stores. I'll stop and see what I can find. And there it was, just rack after rack after rack of Denver Broncos gear. Nothing left for Colorado. There'd be one random shirt in double XL or something. I mean, I could not find anything to spend my money on. And then I'm online trying to order gear. Everything I wanted is sold out everywhere. So I'm most surprised that they have anything left to sell in the store.
Well, I'll text Michael Rubin when we get off and make sure he gets this podcast and tell him he and the team need to get some more Colorado gear out there. Something tells me they're getting that message already. But getting back to your question, there's so many examples we can give of how explosive that growth has been. That just happens to be one that was a real world. And, oh, by the way, 5, 6, 7 days ago, whenever that was, 6 days ago that I was there. But to me, what I actually like more about it than anything else is it reminds all of us that anything can change at any institution. It doesn't matter, Power 5, Group of 5, anything. Remember, all this started at Jackson State, and then it got to Colorado, then it got to Division I, and it got to Power 5. Anything can happen, and it just is a terrific example of how exciting and unique this business of college sports of ours.
And it's almost always directly related to people, and the people that are making the headlines and making the decisions.
That's exactly right. It could be the people in terms of an AD. There's a number of ADs that have in recent years, really kind of changed the complexion of an athletics department. I would love to name 24 of them that I just have been in awe of, but then I don't want to alienate anybody because so many of them done great things. But it could be an AD, Jeff. It could be, in this case with Coach Prime, it could be a coach. Yep. A cult of personality almost at play. It really is pretty extraordinary. And by the way, pair that, just what we've seen in Colorado, the Coach Prime effect. Pair that with what has also played out in the first 5 weeks of college football, which is how many field rushes have we seen? Now, let's put aside for a second whether that's good or smart or safe for kids to be doing. I saw one video this weekend, I think it was from the Ole Miss game, where a kid just did not even a flip, he just rolled off of the crossbar. Unfortunately, it was okay, but put aside the safety and whether or not it's good to do, you can't find another sport on the globe, whether it's a field sport, whether it's a court sport, whether it's an ice sport. You can't find another sport on the globe where you have that kind of display of exuberance and passion like we see in college football. We were in week 1 and kids were rushing the field. It doesn't exist anywhere else. And I constantly take that as a reminder and remind our people and our partners, gosh, this is extraordinary what we get to do And you can't find a parallel in any other pocket in global sports. Pretty cool.
That's why we love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, before we move off, Kristi, Coach Prime, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, there are a lot of perspectives on Coach Prime, and everybody has their opinion on it. But I got to tell you, I thoroughly enjoyed my lunch with him on Thursday. Again, it was totally impromptu. There's nothing. I don't get to go have really cool, neat lunches like that on a regular basis. I was with Rick having lunch, and he showed up, and he's everything you see on TV in person, which tells me that what we see on TV is real. It's genuine. It's who he is. And I saw it on display when it was just three people having lunch. He's just this magnetic personality who is nothing but optimistic about everything that can happen for that program and for those kids. It was pretty neat to see.
And I couldn't be more jealous.
and you can't accomplish what he's accomplished without being good at what you do.
You can't. Yep. That's exactly right. Good at what you do and deliberate about what you do.
Yep.
I mean, everything has a reason in Deion's plan. And everything has a projected outcome, and he's good at it, and he's deliberate. He's deliberate at it.
Well, Cole, we so appreciate you stopping by and chatting with us today. I feel like we got to hit on so many different topics, and hopefully we can have you back again sometime, because I know there's still a lot we could have talked about, but appreciate your time.
Enjoyed being with both of you. Good to see you both, and enjoy the rest of this college football season.
Glad to have you, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks, Jeff.